that feeling of distance, and all of a sudden by putting those marks in, it felt far too close. A lovely contrast between that rock and that grey colour, which I really like that bit there, so I'm going to leave that in. Like that bit there, so I'm going to leave that in. Hello, I'm Lynn Keddie and I love expressive painting. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how I painted this landscape. Okay, so here we go. Now, I've already started by painting in a very, very rough, very thin layer for the sky, and that's mixing cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and some white, and also a little bit of raw umber, and that sort of greys it down a little bit. It's just really to get something in. I'm probably going to be going back to that. Now, I'm using a colour palette of colours that I've been using recently, which I really, really love. They're very subtle, rather sophisticated, probably, colours. And it's Naples yellow, yellow ochre, and raw umber on the left-hand side. And those mixed with ultramarine blue and cerulean blue make some really, really beautiful, subtle greys, grey greens, grey blues. Now, I'm using a palette knife predominantly in this painting. I love painting with palette knives. I think the thing about them is that you can paint very expressively. You can't get lost in the detail too much, and you can mix the paint quickly and then apply it to your canvas or your board. In this case, I'm using a board. I actually really like painting with palette knives on canvases because the canvas gives a little bit. It's a little bit trickier on a board. Now, I'm adding another brown, and this is burnt umber. I want a little bit more richness. I don't often use this combination, but I'm finding it really rather delicious. Quite a bit of ultramarine blue mixed with a small amount of burnt umber gives you this very deep grey violet colour, which is absolutely fabulous for painting in rocks. So as you can see, very quickly applied, and already you get the sense of there being some boulders or rocks in this landscape. Now, what am I thinking about? I guess what I would say is, to be a painter, you have to be very observant. You have to see things all the time. You have to be looking at shapes and colours, shadows, contrasts, and all the rest of it. Just be very aware of where you are. This already is reminding me slightly of a walk that we did, probably 2 years ago in North Cornwall. It just the colours are reminding me of it. It's middle of winter here in the UK. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's pretty miserable here. It's grey skies and rain, and it's been like that for weeks, it seems. And I suppose that's where the inspiration for these colours has come from. But believe you me, these colours are so much nicer than the ones that I can see outside at the moment. So I think I'm starting with this palette and actually really, really enjoying it. And as you can see, I'm just using these colours and mixing up little pools of colour all over my palette, and using them and keeping things fairly clean. And I think you can do that when you use a palette knife. The colours stay more vibrant, and they often don't get muddy. This brush is chasing me around my palette. It's going to get ditched soon, I think. So now I'm introducing a warmer colour using the burnt umber, some of the Naples yellow, and just introducing a different colour. And I'm drawing my palette knife over the board very, very kind of gently, and making some very bold marks. I'm not going over and over it too many times, because then you just end up mixing all the paint together on your board, and it's not very exciting. So putting down fresh marks constantly is the way to go. So mixing up slightly different mixes of colours, you just end up with a great deal of depth and interest, which is difficult sometimes to get if you're actually painting from life because you're concentrating on the shapes that you see and the colours that you see. Whereas with this, I'm just enjoying the colours that I've got on my palette, and just letting the knife drag very gently across the board. Just topping up my ultramarine blue there. I'm mixing more of that lovely dark grey, violetty sort of colour, and it's a great find actually. I think it's brilliant, gorgeous colour. So here I'm just moving across the board, and that's really to balance out those shapes. We've got two dominant shapes that I've already painted, and so to balance it out, bottom left hand side I've painted in another shape, very rough. Now I'm working very quickly, so now what I've done is I've put another darker mark further closer to the, well, further away, close to the horizon. And now I've mixed up an interesting blue with, what did I use? Oh yes, it was just a sort of a lightish coloured green that was on my palette, and I added some blue and a tiny touch of white, I think. Anyway, I've got who knows? I've got this blue, and I'm sort of introducing a different colour because in my head at the moment I'm thinking, let's just introduce a different colour and see how that works. And now that I've sort of started to cover quite a lot of the bottom, I'm just trying to introduce different marks. I'm now scratching into the wet paint, which reveals the white gesso beneath, and just really feeling my way around the painting and seeing how it's going. I feel it's working at the moment. I'm just not too sure about that blue. I have to say, I'm not sure about it. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. So I'm now applying pretty much neat burnt umber. There might be a touch of that blue in it. It's much warmer, and warmer colours come forward, if you like, and cooler colours like the greens that I've got in the distance push the landscape back, if you like. So it gives you a sense of perspective, and that's a really useful tool when you're working to use that. So I've got light, cool colours in the distance and heavier, warmer colours in the foreground. So the yellow ochre and the Naples yellow that I've got in the foreground is a warmer colour, and the burnt umber is a warm brown. Raw umber slightly cooler than that, actually quite a lot cooler than that. And I'm not really using much raw umber in this painting at all. Now I've gone back to that sort of bluey green colour to add, and all I'm doing at the moment now is I'm just sort of trying to add interest and layers of paint without sort of, I don't know, without kind of, so I'm sort of developing the painting. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm developing the painting. Some of it may work, some of it may not. And I think the thing to do at this stage in the game is to be brave. When you start a painting, I think you just get stuff down and see where it takes you. But then as it starts to come together, and particularly if you're starting to think, well, I quite like this, I think this might be working, you get quite, or you can get a little bit scared and think, oh, I don't know, I've got to be careful here. But it's still worth taking risks with your work, because that's how you learn and you develop new ways of working. So it is worth taking the risk. The lovely thing about acrylics is they do dry quickly, and so if you're not happy with something, and that happens a lot, certainly when I paint, you can change it. Now I'm going into the sky because at the moment it's a very thin wash of a couple of blues, lots of white, and a tiny bit of the brown. So it's sort of a grey, sort of bluey colour, and it's just too thin. You know, the one thing that I really don't like is thin paint on a canvas, because it just looks, I don't know, it just looks a bit mean, really. So I'm now going in with a my palette knife, and lots of thick colour. And the way that I apply it is to run the palette knife over the canvas, or in this case the board, uh, very lightly. And you get these wonderful marks that you can't get with a brush. I'm using, it's not pure white, it's sort of mixtures of some of the colours I've already mixed on the palette. And now I'm adding a tiny, tiny bit of Naples yellow to some white on the just beyond that hill in the distance, just to get that sort of bright light that you get sometimes. I don't even think titanium white can be bright enough when you see the sun behind clouds. I'm not suggesting the sun is behind clouds, but it is incredibly bright, bright, bright white that you just can't seem to get in a painting. Except, I think, if you have the contrast between titanium white and a darker colour, and then I think you can sort of see it. I think in some of Patrick Heron's paintings, he demonstrated that brilliantly. So again, I'm using the same mix of the burnt umber and the ultramarine blue to get this wonderful grey colour. Is it too grey? Is it? I don't know. I don't know. Again, I'm applying this quite quickly, but also running my palette knife over that paint very gently. So it's not particularly hard. It's very gentle movement, and you get all these wonderful marks coming through. The top left is the bit of the painting which still has the original sort of wishy-washy thin paint wash over it. So I've got to sort that out. Again, just a few different mixes, because if you look at the sky, apart from on a very, very sort of bland day, there are often in the clouds, there are so many different shades of grey, and then there are colours that come into the sky as well. So you might get a sort of an indigo colour if it's a very stormy sky, or if the sun is setting, you might get a pinky, orangey colour. So lots of different colours in the sky. And also you can throw in colours that aren't even in the sky if you want to. Why not? In fact, I think I might just do that. Okay. I think I'm faffing around quite a bit with the sky, and I probably should just leave it now. And otherwise it's going to get messy, and I don't want, you know. Now I'm going to introduce a different colour. I did this in some work actually quite a few years ago, and I'd completely forgotten about it. But it's to add a little bit of a sort of a pink colour. I'm using quinacridone magenta. That is quite a mouthful. And I can't remember what colour it was that I used before, but actually it's far, far too pink. It doesn't work. So I've added some kind of greyish blue into it, and I've got this lovely sort of lavender colour actually, which I'm just going to introduce to it. Not at all what I thought I was going to be adding to the sky, but there you go. And because I like it so much, I'm going to introduce it into the painting as well. That colour, that sort of lavender colour, looks great with the yellow ochre and the Naples yellow. And the fact that it's sort of echoed in the sky works really well with the painting. So I'm just playing around with it and seeing how it works in this foreground. I always think it's really interesting to throw in unusual colours. You may not like it, and if you don't, you can, of course, paint over it. But it's just that experimentation that's just adds interest to your paintings over time. You know, it's about learning, and if you keep using the same palette all the time, your work just becomes a bit tedious. And I had noticed I was using the same palette quite a lot, so I thought I'm going to change things up a bit. And instead of using cadmium yellow, for example, I'm using Naples yellow and yellow ochre, and they just make really beautiful, very subtle, I guess, wintry sort of greens, to be honest, which is where we are in the UK at the moment. And as you can see, and you can see from my palette as well, it's got an enormous number now of different colours that I've mixed, all pretty subtle, apart from that quinacridone magenta at the top, which hasn't had much of a look in. I'm glad I only put a tiny bit out, otherwise it's just going to be wasted. I don't think that colour would work at all in this painting. Still considering that blue, I also don't think that's really working. So I'm sort of starting to get rid of that. But as I say, it's really worthwhile trying these things out because you'll never know if you don't try. It's at this point in a painting where you've kind of got to a point where things are sort of working, and it's when to stop. When do you actually stop? And at this stage in the painting, I'm kind of looking at bits and pieces and thinking, that's an interesting colour, I'll try that there. But I'm not doing anything too major, as you can see now. And quite often I sit back or step back and take a look and see if anything's looking jarring. You can often see that when you step back, but also when you take a photograph of your work, things really jump out when you take a photograph of your work. Some people look at their work in a mirror. That's a bit complicated. I think when we've all got mobile phones with cameras, then best to take a photograph. But always, by the way, take your photographs in natural light. Don't use room lights or anything like that, because or sunlight because it kills the photograph. So always just natural filtered light, because then you replicate the colours much more clearly and you don't have horrible shadows across your painting from the sun, you know, and all of that kind of thing. Now I'm really at the moment filling in little bits of white just so that I can see on the painting. Maybe it would have been better doing that with a brush, but I was just in the moment, really. Now I'm getting a little bit of interest going on in this little corner. So different marks, lines to probably represent, I don't know, reeds or something like that. Because if you use the same marks throughout a whole painting, it just looks boring. There's a great saying that you start like a builder and you end like a jeweler, and that's pretty much what's happening here. I'm paying much more close attention to smaller marks, little changes. I've been working on this constantly. I haven't taken a break, and it's probably getting close to the time where I really need to. I need to stop and evaluate what I've painted and to check out whether it's all working. And you can only really do that if you stop and you walk away from it for a while. And I always photograph my work, crop it so that you don't have any distracting background like this. And you can really, really see what's working and what isn't. The other thing I like to do is I like to desaturate it in an app in my phone so that I can see the lights and the darks, the contrast in the painting, like this. So if you can see lots of lights and darks and not just lots of midtones, which we tend to drift into sometimes, then that's a successful painting, or the beginnings of one, like this. Now, I'm going to talk you through what I think I need to do on this second pass on this painting, the bits that haven't quite worked. Okay, so looking at this now, and I've looked at it when I've desaturated it and seen that I'm happy with the lights and the darks. I like the way it flows from the hills through down to here. I didn't like that blue. I got rid of it. I think there's a little bit left that I don't particularly like. So I'm just going to get a brush and take some of the lighter blue and just get rid of some of that blue. Wasn't right, that blue. Might take some of that. So I'm making some very minor changes. Get rid of some of that purple. It's more of a grey colour, so it's not quite as purple. But the thing that really bothers me are these two marks here. They are just far too dominant. So I'm just going to mix up some colour to get rid of them. Or at least, yeah, probably just get rid of them. They're not right. They're bringing the it's what am I trying to say? We need to have that feeling of distance, and all of a sudden by putting those marks in, it felt far too close. And I also think I might get rid of this one as well, actually. These haven't quite dried. I don't think that's too much of a problem. I'm going to get rid of that as well. Get rid of that blue. Got some quite nice texture going on there. Get some of that nice grey blue in here. Maybe put a bit of that in. See, I liked it when it came in here. Then you've got the lovely contrast between that rock and that grey colour, which I rather like. And here, whoops, quite like that down there. It looks like a road or something, a path. So that was too light, so I'm going to darken that down. Maybe that's too dark. Yeah, that works. So you see, I'm just making a few minor changes. I quite like that yellow, and I've that sort of yellow ochre. So I'm going to get that back in, a bit more of it, and slightly less of that lavender colour. And also here, it's just too blue, I think, so I'm just going to take that down a little bit. Not completely, because I like that mark there. Let's get a bit more green in there, shall we? Nice grey-green colour. Let's get a little bit more. There it is. Is that going to work? Take out, not all of it, but just take out some of it. A little bit more of that yellow ochre in there. So I'm just really softening it up, I would say, more than anything. I don't want to lose all of it. I want to bring in some of that bright yellow again. It's not yellow ochre, it's Naples yellow, what am I talking about? Which I quite like. And maybe a tiny, tiny, tiny bit over here. So you can see that very minor things going on, but just hopefully sorting out a few of the problems that I wasn't really happy with. Still don't like that. I don't mind the sort of pale blue, but I don't really like the... Maybe I'll put some pale blue back in. Let's see. Yeah, not too much yellow, I don't think, there. Now, I need to get some dark colours in here. Now I'm going to use the burnt umber. I think it's burnt umber. Yeah, burnt umber. And blue. Let's get that blue in. We need quite a lot of blue to make that lovely greyish colour. Let's put that over there. There we go. And I want to get rid of some of... So I'm just painting over some little bits just to... I really like that bit there, so I'm going to leave that in. I like that bit there, so I'm going to leave that in. Let's add a little bit more depth to that, not much. Let's get rid of that funny line there. Get rid of some of this white that's showing through, which doesn't look right. Tiny bits. Tiny bits are okay. Let's wipe my brush. Let's see, what else have we got going on here that we don't like? Let's get rid of some of these little white bits. Don't quite look right. There we go. And on my palette, I'm just looking for the sort of colours that I've already mixed and using those just to tidy up bits of it. That feels too dark to me, that area there. Okay, I think we're nearly there. The sky. I think the sky, for me, is a bit too messy up here, so I'm going to take a brush rather than a palette knife, and I'm just going to... It's still wet, so I'm just going to get rid of a bit of that, not all of it. Get some white in there. Actually, do you know, I'm going to try this. Have I got some? This is baking sheet. Now, this may not work at all, but I'm going to give it a go. Just rub that in and put it off. See if any of that paint comes off. It does, and it makes quite an interesting mark. Do I like it? I don't know. I don't know. It's quite a stormy looking sky. I may be doing the wrong thing. Just let me tidy that up. You just get completely different feeling if you use a brush. It's completely different textures and everything. I don't really want to do too much, so I think I might just leave it as it is. Let's just get that funny little mark out of the way. Let's get some light colour. There we go. There we go. Oh, we've got a weird mark there. Let's get rid of that. So as I say, just some very small changes. I've seen something that annoys me, and that's this break here, which doesn't look right, so I'll just change that slightly. And that's it, I think. I think. Put a bit dark in that little bit there. I'm going to paint with my finger this edge because it's a little bit white looking. And that's it. Take another photograph, check it out, and hopefully it's all good. This is the final photograph of the painting, and I'm just going to compare it with the first pass on this painting, and you can see how much rougher it looks. And I think by spending that extra time working on it, it's developed it a lot more. It just feels so much more, I don't know, right. I think that's the way I'd describe it. So if you enjoyed this video, do please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. By subscribing, you're not paying for anything. It's not a paid for subscription. It's completely free. You'll just get notified of when my videos come up. So until next time, bye for now.